Stand by. Is this thing on?
Yes, Dan.
Oh, hello.
You're listening to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
This just in.
Breaking news to report.
We are live.
Old newscasters
Can we just say former?
Sure. Former newscasters reunite behind the mic after more than 20 years.
Old news is good news.
Stay tuned. Today, we are happy to have Tod Pritchard with us. You've heard his name in many, many of our episodes. All good stuff, of course. Don't worry, Tod. Tod was our news director at WKOW TV in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Since then, he's been a news director in Hawaii, worked for the state of Wisconsin in emergency preparedness and management. And for the past 7 years, Tod has worked for the Wisconsin Foundation and Alumni Association. And that's that beautiful view behind him that you see right now. So Tod Pritchard, welcome to Old News. We are so excited to catch up with you. It's been a long time.
Oh, Carrie and Dan, thank you for having me on, and it's awesome to see you guys again. This is great. I am so looking forward to chatting with you guys.
We are
It's
too.
great to see you too. And we have to do this, right, Tod?
Oh, yes, the W. UW.
Where did that come from? Do you remember where that came from?
No, because I did not do that when I was at school, but now I see it everywhere.
It came from Brett Bielema.
I was going to say it was
former
Brett Bielema.
coach. Yep. He decided that to signal in a certain play, and I don't remember what it was, but to send in a signal for a play, that was the signal for one of the plays that they were calling. And so then someone spotted him doing that, like, well, hey, why don't we all start doing that? So if you're wondering, where did that come from? It was Brett Bielema. Yep.
And then the whole team got so confused because they saw everybody in the stands, so they kept running the play.
Is that the play? Oh, okay.
Well, that's kind of two things he did, because a lot of the guys then also adopted his, how at the end of his interviews and stuff, he'd say, and on Wisconsin.
Yes.
And then Russell Wilson kind of carried that on, and a lot of other guys, and some guys still do that.
Yeah, a lot of those guys at that era did that, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
It is. And you know what, Russell Wilson now lives not too far from me. He's at the Berg for playing for the Steelers.
Yeah, that's right.
I know. He's like my neighbor now.
Fabulous season. This is great seeing him come back.
I know.
I remember watching him playing at Camp Randall and had a tough year or two, right, with Denver, and now he's really back on his feet in Pittsburgh, which is awesome to see.
I don't know if we should move backwards since you're in such a lovely place. Why don't you just tell us about exactly where you are, and then we'll rewind back to the beginning.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I am actually joining you today from our beautiful, I think this is the most beautiful conference room in Madison.
So cool.
Yeah. So we're overlooking Alumni Park over here. And of course, the terrace is over here. The terrace chairs are gone for the season, but and of course, looking over the lake, which is awesome. So yeah, I am so blessed. I work at the Wisconsin Foundation and Alumni Association, as you mentioned, and it's just fabulous, and we can get into why it's so fabulous as we go along. But yeah, I thought I'm going to have a special background, so I'm going to come and join you from this beautiful, beautiful spot here overlooking the lake.
It's awesome.
It's almost as good as Bob Miller's, who did it from the shores of the Atlantic in Ireland. But,
I can't beat Bob. Yeah,
yours is close. It's pretty cllose.
It's impossible. Yeah,
Madison's a pretty beautiful place.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I keep coming back, and I'm here to stay now. So yes, I'm not going anywhere.
So I remember you were working for emergency preparedness, Wisconsin Emergency Management, but then you've been over there now for about 7 years. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yep.
And so kind of give us an idea of what you do.
Yeah, so I work with, I do media and public relations. So I get to wear like several different hats with that. One of them is, that I absolutely love, is storytelling. So I'm able to tell the stories of amazing Badger alumni. And I've been able to do that through, I did a series of podcasts. I've been able to do a series of videos. And it's just awesome meeting these really great people, talking with them, and and sharing their stories with the rest of the world. And I think that, sometimes we forget how many awesome people come out of this university. And I think it's good to remember that and circle back with those folks when we can. So I've interviewed UW women's hockey standout Megan Dugan. I've talked to just endless number of people, and and they all just love coming back to the university. Like, to a person, they love coming back, love sharing their stories, and love being in around the elements here of the university. Most of my job is a lot about storytelling and then helping the media tell stories, right? So you'll occasionally I'll even though I have a face for radio, you'll occasionally see me pop up every once in a while talking about the university. But what I try to do is like really reach out to media, here in Madison, throughout the state, mainly, and of course around the country and the world sometimes, to help tell the story of the university and our alumni. So like Fill the Hill is always a big event for us, where it's a big fundraiser, and we always have all the morning shows come out and do live shots from the base of Bascom Hill, and we gotta always have a lineup of cameras going, and that's always a lot of fun doing those kind of events.
Are there some people who you've had to talk to that you've kind of pinched yourself, like, I can't believe I'm talking to this person, whether it was in person or live, or on the phone or whatever?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of folks, and it's kind of like, Jay Wilson. I watched your podcast with Jay, and I'm actually from Wisconsin Rapids.
Yep.
As well. He was from Pittsville. He went to Assumption High School. I went to Lincoln. But I must say, I kind of like I'm just a kid from Wisconsin Rapids, and I do have to pinch myself all the time. Like, how am I actually talking to this person right now? Like, some of the ones that stand out to me, like James Patterson, the author. His wife is a Badger alum, and he has kind of adopted the university as his own. And so I've had a chance to talk to him on several different occasions. That's been awesome. Manu Raju, who's an alum who is now CNN's chief congressional reporter, has been here a couple of times. I've been able to talk to him. J.J. Watt, we got to do an interview with him. Ann McKee, who is the leading researcher in head trauma and concussions, and her work that has been like groundbreaking. I did a podcast with her, and that was really I'm just in awe of these people. And yes, I do have to pinch myself, like, wow, how am I able to do this? This is crazy. Yeah.
Well, and that's where your media experience. I know you were a news director for many years, obviously, but you also kind of worked in the trenches. Even when you were a news director, you did, I remember. And so that experience probably came in pretty handy, and has come in handy since you've been doing public relations too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Dan, it's kind of like, it's really come full circle for me, because, I'm going to go way back.
Let's go way back.
I'm going to take you way back here. But, for me, like, it's all about storytelling. And I've always loved doing that all my life. And I feel like that's kind of where I started in life, basically, and then kind of have circled all the way back to that. For me, it really began with as a kid, my mom really encouraged me to follow my passions and dreams, and she is just I'm going to start crying probably here. She's gone now, but she made such an impact in my life. And one of the things that she did was she loved taking movies. Like, she was all about visuals. So she took home movies of everything. She and my dad used to go riding out west on motorcycles, and she would do like these shots where she would like sequence him driving down the road, and then, and put these little films together. And and she did that all through my life. And I love that. I love that she was able to tell these stories in pictures. And so as I grew older, I kind of like, I wanted to do that too, right? So she got me a little camera, and
Mhm.
she showed me how to compose shots, and a lot of older TV people remember back in the day used to shoot on film, right?
Mhm.
And the veterans over at Channel 27 at KOW used to tell me that they had such a um, they had such a uh, tight budget for film that they could only shoot, like, they get like 50 feet of film, and that was all that they'd have for the day, right? So whatever you're going to shoot, you got 50 feet, right? So you have to kind of like sort of edit in the camera. You have to like shoot right, and kind of like put your shots together and sequence it, because
Yeah.
A, you don't have very much film, and B, you don't have very much time to
Mhm.
put that film through the soup and get it onto the air, right? So
Mhm.
you have to sort of edit in the camera. Well, she kind of taught me how to do that too, because we didn't have very much money and film was really expensive. So she
Mhm.
kind of taught me how to edit in the camera.
Hmm.
So I picked that up, and I actually I have my old movie camera with me.
Really?
Here's my old, so I think I was probably about 14 or so. She got me for Christmas this sound
Hmm.
movie camera.
Sound.
Yes. See
Highfalutin.
Look at
Yeah.
that.
got the boom mic, right? So it was a 8 millimeter, and it had a little magnetic strip on the side of the film where it recorded, like, basically like an audio tape
Hmm.
of the audio. And so I really started telling stories with this camera. And it was stories basically of like what we're doing at home, and what was going on. My mom was like the first person I put on film, right? To her talking about um, Christmas of 1976, I think, is what she was talking about. So that really kind of like started my thinking about like doing this as like a career.
Hmm.
I used to shoot stand-ups with this camera. I would set the camera up and try to frame it, and then walk into the picture, and I'd shoot my own stand-ups, right? Of like
Tod
telling.
Pritchard reporting from Wisconsin Rapids.
That's exactly what I was doing.
The
And
turkey is in the oven. This
right,
just in.
exactly.
Turkey is in the oven.
That's right.
Very
That's
nice.
exactly what I was doing. But it was such great practice, because it was like really like that's where I ended up going. I went through, I graduated high school, had no idea, like sort of thought about this, but I was like, oh, I'm just not, like, I don't have the wherewithal to really like be in television. I don't know how that's gonna ever happen. So I went to UW Stevens Point for a
Mm.
year,
Mm-hmm.
and they have and still to this day have an outstanding student radio station, WWSP.
Yep.
And I walked in there, they were looking for volunteers to read the news, right? So I walked in there one day, and I sat down behind the microphone, and I read, like, rip and read Associated Press copy, right? It was the
Mm-hmm.
old kicker machine in the back of the room going dit, 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 and printing out stuff. And you take
Yep.
rip the sheet off, and you'd be like, oh, well, here, Washington, the president today, yada, yada.
Yeah.
I fell in love. It was like, stop everything. This is what I want to do. This is it.
Oh.
I want to be on the air
Mhm.
telling stories, right? And um and that's where it all started. And I ended up transferring to UW Eau Claire, where they had a
Mm.
journalism department, and had an awesome professor. His name was Henry Lippold, and he's a legend in Wisconsin broadcasting. Many, many folks went through the UW program, remember Henry,
Mm.
and he was inspirational to me. And I took his classes, fell in love with being in television and writing for television and reporting, and the kind of took off from there.
Well, you said before, Todd, and this is one of my memories of first meeting you in the newsroom back in the day at WKOW. The first thing that struck me when I met you was your voice. And I'm sure when you went into that little radio station in Stevens Point and started reading, they were like, man, this kid's got pipes, because you do have a great,
Mm-hmm.
you have one of those great radio voices, so to speak.
Yeah.
And was that something that anybody commented on right away when you were doing radio in Stevens Point?
That's a great question, Dan. I get that comment all the time now,
Oh,
like
really?
all the time. And it's funny because really my career, I didn't really do that much with my voice. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's probably one of the few regrets that I have. I kind of wish I had done a little bit more with that, but
It's not too late, Todd. It's not too late.
it's never too late, right? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's very true. Um, I think I always had kind of a deep voice. I did a lot of singing in high school, like I was really
Oh,
into choir and stuff. And
uh-huh.
so
You were a
maybe
So
that's
you
bass?
it.
weren't a tenor.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
was
was gonna say.
I was not. I was singing that bass line all the time.
I had to
Um,
sing at 7:30 mass recently in the morning, and I think I was singing the bass line too. I was like, "Oh boy, 7:30. No, thank you." Oh, bo, bo, bo.
yeah, I was always down low, right? Yeah.
Mhm,
Now uh, I think that I always wanted to do more on air and like I felt like I wanted to use my voice a little bit more,
mhm,
but I kind of got pushed into more like producing. So
mm,
I did some reporting and it was great. And um, but I ended up kind of going more in the direction of being a newscast producer, and in a way that really kind of it fit my personality a lot. I love telling, like to me, being a producer is like telling the story of the day, right?
mm,
You're
Right.
assembling all these different pieces and parts, and reporters are coming in with information, and you're gathering information from other sources, and you're trying to tell people the story of what happened today. What's the
mhm,
story of the day? And I love doing that. I think that kind of goes to my um somewhat, nerdy, meticulous nature of trying to get all
mhm,
those pieces and parts to fit together and figure out how much time we have left in the newscast and what can we do? And um
mhm.
but and I also, like I said earlier, I do have a face for radio. So like my like the- being a guy going bald when you're like in your 20s really doesn't help with a television career. So
Hmm.
that kind of short-circuited being on the air for me.
Now you're in. You're
I was
in
gonna
now.
say you're just ahead of your time. Now
I'm
everybody's bald and cool with a beard. See, like you, you're like totally trending.
You were a trendsetter. That's
Oh
You
for
yeah,
sure.
were
right.
a
Yeah.
trailblazer. Where did you go to produce first or
I
report?
Yes. So my first, I was an intern at WQOW in Eau Claire, which is a sister station to WKOW. It was owned by the same, at that time it was TAC Communications.
Mm-hmm.
It's been transferred hands many, many times after that. But I loved doing stories. It was great. It was one man band, right? You had this giant Ikegami camera on your shoulder, which weighed 3 billion pounds, and you had a
You didn't tell him, hey, I have my own camera.
yeah, I could have
Yeah.
just shot with this. Look at how cool that is, right? I could have
Yeah.
just shot with that. But
Helping film.
so
Uh,
yeah, a big 3/4 inch deck on your hip and trying to shoot stuff. Um, my first like and kind of like Sandy Kowal, who also we could talk about, is one of my dearest friends. She started in production. I did too. I actually started in production at WEAU TV
mm,
Mhm.
in Eau Claire, which is kind of the big dog NBC station there and still is. So I did all sorts of like, I worked production and working behind the scenes in newscasts, and then did the internship. My first real like news producing job was at WAOW, again, another sister station in Wausau.
mm.
And I loved that. It was great. I loved being a producer there. It was so much fun. We actually had computers back then, which was like very simple word processors to type up stories, and that was great.
You were ahead of the curve. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that place was way ahead of the curve. Yeah, so that's where I started, and then
Hmm.
I went on to I went on to KCRG in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I
Oh.
always say I spent 9 glorious months at KCRG. It was a
Which is
very short.
that's a long period of time at some stations, 9 months. You're like, gosh, it's almost a year. I got to move on.
Yeah. It was one of those things where my dream job came up. So I was producing there, and I got a call wondering if I'd be interested in being a producer at Care 11 in Minneapolis.
Wow.
Yeah, to me um that was like I think Jay had talked about this in his, like, I can't remember where it was like going to the Super Bowl. It was like
Mm,
it was like being invited to the Super Bowl for me.
yeah.
Yeah.
That it
Yeah.
was a premier um news station. Paul Majors was the anchor there, Pat Miles, Diana Pierce. It was a great group of reporters and outstanding photographers. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sandy Kowal went to Denver, and to a great photo shop, and Kara was really like neck and neck with her
Hmm.
place there.
Who was your
Um,
news director there at Care? Do you remember?
oh, we had a series of different news
Yeah.
directors. Yeah. Um, Nick
You know
Lawler
that
was the
feeling, right?
yeah. Nick Lawler was the first news director I had there. Um, uh, I could still hear his voice. There was one time where we were in the middle of a newscast, and it was the 5 o'clock show. I was producing the 6, and for whatever reason, like they called for a package to roll, and the tape didn't run, and it was like the anchor was just sitting there like this.
Say something.
And I heard Nick running down the hallway, and I'll use a little different language here, but he didn't quite say this, but he's like, I could hear his voice still. Roll the tape. Roll the tape. Roll the GD tape. Like that's going to do any good. Like you're running news director running down the hallway. It's not going to help you.
They all know. Everybody knows.
Everyone knows, yes. But
I
yeah,
just I just asked because I was wondering, because you eventually did become a news director. I
yes.
was wondering if there was any news director that kind of took you under her or his wing and kind of mentored you along, or if that was just something. I mean, that was kind of the progression, production. You'd be a producer, maybe executive producer, and then news director, hopefully.
Yeah,
Um,
right. That's right, Dan. That's exactly kind of the path I took. I was a producer. I went on to be a producer and an executive producer at King TV in Seattle, which again
Mm.
is an outstanding organization. And I had a lot of mentors and people who really helped me out. Um, I guess I have to still go back to Henry Lippold though, because Henry was right the inspiration.
yeah.
Oh.
Um, I got to tell you a quick Henry story. So, again, this is going back to he was my professor at UW Eau Claire. He was like the only broadcast professor, and uh, broadcast journalism 101, right? I walk in, take a seat. Henry walks in. He's got gray hair. He's kind of hunched over. He's carrying this big stack of books. He's like, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, when you tell a story, you got to get all the angles.
Mhm.
You got to get all the angles. You got to get low. You got to get low. And he dropped like this behind his desk. So I can't see him. He's like this. You got to get low. You got to get low. And then somehow he said, you got to get up high. You got to get up high. And he literally, and I'm not going to even attempt it, he leapt straight up in the air and landed on top of the desk.
Wow.
You got to get up high. You got to get up high. You got to get
Landed.
all the angles. You got to see all the angles. I was like,
How old was this guy?
I know. I'm thinking he needed to go to the Olympics in track and field.
well, I thought he needed to go to an insane asylum because
Or
Right.
that.
I thought this guy is certifiable crazy. Like,
You're like,
what
this is going to be a
going
fun
on,
class. Yeah.
right? But that was Henry. That was Henry. He was like, he had so much energy. I guess Henry was probably in his late 40s at that
Okay.
point, early 50s. I mean, he was not a spring chicken at that point.
But clearly in
Excuse
shape
me.
at the good
I was
jump.
going to say, I am a spring chicken. I'm right in there.
But he was like jumping all over.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, it is. And so I was like, wow. But I got to realize that Henry was like a really special man. And just did everything he could for his students, everything. Like, and he taught me how to write, and he taught me how to shoot. He taught me how to be, anchor a newscast, and um, just like everything. It's amazing. And he was always there. We had this little newsroom, um, the student newsroom where we put newscasts together. Like if you did his 305 level class, it was like you would do a Tuesday and Friday, I think, newscast. And we'd be in the newsroom, and he would be there like all the time, like 8 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night. He's still there, right?
Hmm.
One time he was like, he would do this. He'd be at his typewriter. He'd be at his typewriter typing, right? And he'd be like, "Oh, time for a nap, time for a nap." And he'd fold his arms and he'd put his head down and he would fall asleep. Like he was out. There was all sorts of chaos going on around him, right? People are running around, they're trying to write stories, we're under deadline, whatever. And then he'd like, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he'd be like, oh, tip top, tip top. And he'd start typing exactly where he left off and just keep writing, right?
Wow.
How does the guy do this, right?
That's a talent right there.
Yes.
I want to talk to, is he still with us?
No, he's
Oh,
gone.
too
Ah,
bad.
He
He'd
passed
be
away a
a
few
guy to
years
talk
ago.
to.
He is
Yeah.
just,
Mm.
oh, he was just awesome. Yeah. So I had a lot of folks who really influenced me, but Henry was
Mhm.
by far the number one person. Yeah.
That's
Isn't that something? We
so
talk
cool.
about that a lot on
Yeah.
this podcast. Obviously, we had Professor Hoyt from
Yes, Jim is awesome.
yeah, from Jim.
Mhm.
Jim was great, and that was a big impact on Carrie's life. Mine
Mhm.
was Pat Hastings, who was at
Mm.
UW Milwaukee, and they're at UW then too. And you know, they are responsible for putting so many people into positions in the industry just by their encouragement. And sometimes they might help too by putting a good word in for you and things like that. And I mean, you really need to rely on those people. Um, and it's always good to hear those stories about those people
Mhm.
because they probably don't get enough credit until people like you or Carrie or I say something to thank them because boy, even though sometimes the media can be a real tough business, it sure is. It was the consensus from most of the people we've talked to is that it was a great point for them to start their career.
I remember Jay was again going back to the podcast you had with Jay Wilson. He was talking about that moment with Barry Alvarez at the
Yes.
Rose Bowl. I
Mhm.
was actually in the control room when that was happening, when the Badgers won the Rose Bowl and Jay was vamping, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Barry Alvarez came running up. He gave Jay this big bear hug, and Jay may not remember this, but I remember thinking the same thing Jay was thinking. Oh my God, is he going to like let loose on some like swearing or like because he has no idea that we're on. And he
Right, that
said,
you're rolling.
right, but he said something. I think these are his exact words. He said, "Is this great or what?"
And you were probably in the control room like with goosebumps, like,
Right. I was like, oh, thank God. Okay. All right. Good. We'll take that. That was awesome. Well,
That is
yeah,
awesome.
and I had goosebumps at that moment. Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah.
At what point did you really decide, yes, I'd like to be a news director someday?
That's a great question, Carrie. I really felt like I wanted to try that probably I think when when I was at King TV, I really I kind of progressed from being a producer to an executive producer, and I knew I probably wasn't going to be a news director in Seattle. You have to, that probably was not realistic, and that's no problem. But I really felt like I wanted to try that at some point, and the opportunity came up. I got a call from a headhunter who wanted to know if I was interested in applying for the job at 27 at WKOW.
Oh.
And as a news director, I was like, it was perfect timing. It was great. I felt like I was ready. And so you had mentioned Bob Miller. So I interviewed with Bob over the phone, probably about he must have called me like 12 times. I don't know. Like it was and these long, like hour-long, conversations about things, which was great. But when I got to about number 12, I was like, oh my gosh.
Am I getting this job or not?
It's just so he called me up one morning. It was call number 13 or so. And I was like, he said, Todd, I got one more question for you. Like, oh, dear God, what is this going to be? He's like, can you sing the Wisconsin fight song? Yeah, sure. On Wisconsin. He's like, stop. Okay, you got the job.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So I packed my stuff and moved to Madison and walked in the newsroom and met you guys, met the person who would become my best friend that I've ever had in my entire life, Sandy Kowal. And we were, whatever combo you want to talk about, Batman, Robin, or, we were,
Sonny and Cher.
yeah, right. I think Sonny and Cher is actually a good analogy.
Because Sandy can really sing. I mean, she can go, she is a good singer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's true. Right. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's a good cover.
And so can her bird.
Yeah, it was just it was such a great pairing. And Sandy said it really well on your podcast. And she wanted to be the manager. She wanted to become the manager that she never really had. Like she wanted to be like, what were the qualities that she wasn't able to get out of other folks? And I felt the same way. I wanted to be a manager who really let people run with the ball. Like we have a lot of really smart people. You guys were great at that, right? I mean, you guys were on it. You were creative. You did fun stuff. You were smart. It was like, run with it, do it, go. Like I'll just jump in and kind of help tweak every once in a while or give you some feedback, but you should go. Sometimes, in news, you just have people who are just like always on you and just like constantly kind of just riding your, riding your backside, and like, just let people do their, what they're really great at. And
yeah, you and Sandy were both really good at that, and you kind of have a similar personalities in that you have trust in people. I think that you trusted us to do our thing unless we proved otherwise. And it wasn't like, prove to me you can do it. It was like, we'll go and I'll rein you in if need be.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to work with her for another 15 years after that. So it was hard to stop working together because, it's just, she is one of those people, like you said, who, she's probably that way with almost everybody, Todd. She's just one of those people you can get along with, and she's smart. And not to turn this into a Sandy Kowal love fest, but she's able to communicate with everybody, no matter what. So yeah, I agree. You two had a really simpatico style, and it was it was very much appreciated back in the day.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, it was it's Carrie and I were talking a little bit earlier about kind of the secret sauce. What makes a great newsroom a great newsroom? And I think maybe that's what it really comes down to, Carrie. It's the people, right? It's
Mhm.
having those great relationships with people you trust. And that doesn't happen in a lot of newsrooms. I mean,
Mm.
I won't name names, but I've been in a lot of newsrooms where that is just not happening. And it's kind of the culture of the place. It's kind of the people who are, are you're interfacing with every day. And, when you hire really great people who know their stuff and can just run with that ball,
Yeah.
that's when the magic happens, right?
Mhm.
And we were so fortunate. I think I realized it at the time when we were at 27 together. Like I realized how special it was, and I knew when I left it was going to be like I really didn't want to leave, but I felt like I had to try one more experience, and
Mm.
um, uh, so I knew at the time it was special, and it really was. That I had a convertible at the time,
Mm.
and I put the top down. It was September 11th, obviously. I remember thinking, there's no way I should be putting this top down on this car in September, but it was so beautiful, like the sun and the it was just gorgeous. And I was listening to WIBA AM radio coming in, and I hear this report of a small plane has crashed into one of the towers at the World Trade Center. I I got my private pilot's license when I was 16,
Oh, whoa.
and I knew that the minute I heard that, I was like, there is no way a small plane just flies into the World Trade Center.
Like
Hmm.
That
accidentally, right?
accidentally, right?
Yeah.
That is like, you've got to be working really hard to fly
Hmm.
a plane into a specific, into a building. And And so I remember I just like, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I had no idea. And of course, nobody really knew at that moment, but I hit the gas. I'm like, holy cow, I am like so I flew into the rest of my driving to work, and I ran in, and like right when I walked in the newsroom, the second plane hit.
Oh, boy.
And yeah, right, exactly. Like, oh boy. Okay. So we we got a group together. Bob Miller was there. Sandy, we got a group of folks together, and we were like, well, what are we going to do? So we collectively just kind of decided, let's go. Let's go. This is going to be the biggest story. And
Oh, it's the
yeah,
biggest story of the last 40
Mm.
years.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I have no idea what we're going to do. I have no idea how we're going to do it. I don't know, but let's just go. Let's just, so, so Greg Brunner was the satellite truck operator.
Yeah.
Monique Lavin jumped in the truck along with, I think it was Ryan Moore was the photographer.
Yeah. It
And
was. I've talked to
yep,
him about this. Yep.
Mm.
yep. And they broke the land speed record for getting that satellite truck from that morning, 9 o'clock that night, like 30 seconds before the Fox 47 News was going to go on the air, which we were producing at the time. About 30 seconds before, um, the mass cam on the satellite truck clicked on and shot back a signal, and we popped that thing on right at the top of the show. And I'll never forget that. Just pitch dark except for all the floodlights shining on on this scene of this tragedy, and just smoke still billowing into
Yeah.
the air, right? And um and Monique did some of the most amazing storytelling I've ever seen.
Mm.
I mean, just heartbreaking stories. Like, at the beginning, obviously people still thought, well, maybe there's a chance. Maybe I have a loved one, maybe somehow he or she got out of the building with no ID and they're in a hospital. And, so I remember she did one story where the street was just full of missing posters with people's faces and their
Mm.
name.
Uh,
And, and many of them were from Wisconsin. She ran into so many people from Wisconsin.
Really?
Yeah. Um, and you just knew, like, they're gone. And then of course there's sort of the business end of things, right? So we sent our satellite truck all the way there. Bob Miller said to me, we have to, like, this is costing us a fortune. Like, we're buying all the satellite time, which was very expensive at the time. We have to find a way of making some, some of this money back that we're spending on this. So I ended up, like, basically living in my office, renting out the satellite truck to other TV stations that needed to do live shots, right?
Really?
Yeah, so not only was I was coordinating our coverage, but then I was like literally on the phone, like
You're a
taking
satellite
orders.
salesman.
I
You
was like Mr.
were.
Salesman, right,
Yeah.
right.
That's
What do you,
interesting and quick thinking on Bob's part.
yes, it was, right. So we made up the money and then
Hmm.
some. But I remember I literally slept on the floor of the office for a couple of days. Like, I would get a cat nap in every once in a while.
I'm sitting here now thinking that would all be done now with cell phones.
Right.
Basically people would be on FaceTime or whatever, sending it back. I mean, I know people still have the mini units and things like that, but just the logistics involved in covering a huge event back then took so many more people and so many more people hours and the money.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The logistics of that. I mean, we just, like, trying to get that giant truck into New York was like the very first night when we put that live shot up. They actually pulled into Frank Sinatra Park in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is across the river from New York, right? So that's how we got that shot up. We were like, there was no way we were going to make it into New York in time. So we, like, stopped at Frank Sinatra Park of all places and popped that shot. But then, like, we had to get permits to get into New York to do live shots from as close as we could to the World Trade Center. That's one of the most memorable stories I think I was ever involved in.
Yeah. After that, did you have a bit of a crash or a letdown just after the event itself was so horrific, and then just B, the adrenaline of doing all of that? Did you have a crash after?
I did to a certain extent, but then something really strange happened. That's when I, like, literally right after all this, probably 2 weeks after 9/11, talk about crazy timing. I got a call again from a headhunter wondering, are you interested in taking a job in Honolulu, Hawaii? So yeah, I crashed, and then I was like, wait a sec, what? What did you just say to me? Like, did you say Honolulu? And uh so I ended up taking that job. So I kind of, like, um there was a little bit of time. They let me kind of stick around for a while at 27 while we got through, basically through the rest of the year. Because obviously the world was turning upside down, and I didn't feel like I could leave immediately, and they gave me some time to do that. But yeah, I suddenly got kind of blindsided by an offer that I thought, well, you know what? I don't really want to leave, but I also, like, this is really a great opportunity and an adventure of a lifetime. I always dreamed of living in Hawaii, and um, thought it was a really great opportunity. So yeah, so I kind of went from, like, crazy coverage to kind of an emotional letdown to, holy cow, I got to spin up and, like, move to to Honolulu. So
How long were you there in Honolulu then?
I was there for 7 years.
7 years.
Yep, as news director. Yep.
And is that where you met your wife?
I did, yes.
So it all worked out.
What's that?
So it all worked out.
It did. It was, yes. I'll tell you a funny story about that. I was obviously moved by myself, and worked for several years, and was like, I really, I so want to have someone special in my life. I want to have a family, that kind of stuff. But how do I make that happen? So um, there was, and I think it's still around, there was a program called It's Just Lunch where you could
Mm,
sign up and they would,
Yes.
yeah, have you
Yeah.
heard of that?
I do
I
remember that.
have.
Yeah.
This is not a commercial for It's Just Lunch because I don't know if they use, but
Unless
they
they
would
want to pay
match,
us, then yes, we'll take
Yeah.
yeah,
it.
they match you up with people who, they do a very extensive profile and match you up with people that they think would be a good fit. So, so I signed up for this program and like they guarantee you 12 lunches. It is exactly what it is. It's just lunch. Like you
Hmm.
just meet for lunch. They set up the lunch place.
Hmm.
They coordinate with you. You meet. If you want to continue talking to the person, you exchange information. If you don't, you say, well, we got a
Hmm.
nice lunch and we move on. So I had 12 It's Just lunches and that was kind of the limit for the membership. And then they kind of took pity on me and gave me 4 bonus,
They made it a baker's dozen and gave you a little more.
Plus
gave me a
three,
little
yeah.
more, and I still was not finding that person. And
Uh,
so they said, well, you know what, Todd, why don't you come in and like you should kind of re-up and redo your membership. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it was not a very wasn't a inexpensive um thing. And so but I was like, okay, I went in and I was kind of, well, let's just do a new profile of you and maybe we're just not finding the right people. And then the person I talked to was like, I don't want to sound like I'm just like really pushing you to sign up for this, but I'm not kidding you. We just met this woman and her name is Lisa.
hmm.
And I think would be perfect for you. I think you'd be a great fit. I'm like, oh, what a line. This is great. Like, like get the hook. All right.
Right.
Okay. All right. Fine. I'll sign up. Well, sure enough, that was my future wife. Lisa and we had our first date. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is the love of my life.
Oh.
And somehow we got through all this. Now, a footnote, she had just signed up as well, right?
So now you
So
still have 11 lunches left.
right. Like I was done. I'm ready. I'm like, I've met I'm good. This like, she is it. So I remember she called me and I had come back to Wisconsin to visit my mom and dad. And she called me up and she was like, yeah, I signed up for this. I feel like I really probably should go on a couple more dates and I really like you, but I just feel like, and I was like on the phone, I'm like, oh, I understand. And yeah, it was very expensive. And inside I'm going, no, no, don't, don't do it. But I'm Mr. Cool on the phone. Right. I get it. Right. She went on a couple, and I'm like literally like biting my nails. Um, and she called me up on the phone a couple of weeks later,
And
and
she
she was
said, can you sing the Wisconsin fight
like,
song?
No, it was the Honolulu,
yeah, can
yeah,
you sing
whatever
the Hawaii
University
fight
of
song,
Hawaii
right?
fight song.
Which is
Yeah.
in Hawaiian, which is very difficult to sing.
Yeah.
Um, no, she actually said, yeah, you're it. You're the guy. Yep. I'm done.
Nice.
Yep.
Very cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it all
So
paid off. Hey, I just
Hmm.
want to, before you move on from this, you talked about how like you had the lunch with somebody, and then what was it like at the end if you kind of like you didn't really have that connection? Was that an awkward like, okay, well, we'll see you then, and you don't exchange any information? What was the end of those ones that didn't work out like?
Um, yes,
Yes.
sometimes awkward. Um, but I think people were genuinely like understood that if it just wasn't connecting, like it was really meant for like professionals who are very short on time
Sure.
and so most of the time people were like, yeah, I I get it. That's great. It was
Hmm.
really nice to meet you and that kind
Hmm.
of stuff. I mean, and so it wasn't it wasn't super awkward. People were very kind and very am very nice about it. Yeah.
So, meanwhile, back in the newsroom, what did you find when you arrived in Hawaii? Was it a big culture shock in terms of what you're covering, your day to day, your news meetings, what you put on the air? Was that all different, or was it more of the same in a different location?
That's a great question, Carrie. The coverage was very similar. It wasn't really that much different than any other than being local news anywhere else, except that um, there were just some there are just some very like specific cultural things about Hawaii that you just
Mhm.
have to understand, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of it is kind of what you guys have probably heard of, kind of that aloha spirit. People are very friendly, they're very welcoming. Um, but it also came with a lot of challenges too, and um, it uh, it was a in some ways it was a difficult newsroom to handle,
Mhm.
um, and uh, had some challenges that I really wasn't ready for, and to a certain extent, I never really felt like I was a good fit for that place. I felt like I was a
Mhm.
great fit for at 27 and some other places I worked at, but you know, I just didn't feel like uh, that I was a great fit for them.
Did you feel like an outsider almost?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I was, that's a great way to put it, Dan, because like, um, I was always going to be the Howley from Wisconsin. Howley is the term for a
Foreigner, basically.
European white guy,
Yeah.
right?
Mm. Mm.
So, no matter how long I stayed there, I was always going to be the Howley from Wisconsin. I was always going to be
Mm.
that guy from Wisconsin. And I've lived in other cities, like, in Seattle. I fit in very quickly with what was going on. But, Hawaii is a different place,
Mhm.
and they are very welcoming, but they also like somewhat, like if you're born on the island, you kind of keep tight with the people you went to high school with
Mhm.
and
Sure.
your friends, and you don't let other people, especially if you're moving in from the mainland, really come into your life because there's a pretty good chance you're going to move in 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
right? A lot of
Right.
people go there, they have a short stint, and then they kind of move back.
Mhm.
Um, so I got that and I understood that. The first moment I had kind of a uh-oh moment was um, one of the reporters had invited me to a um, kind of a dinner party, welcome party at her house. I won't name names to protect the innocent,
Yes.
but her husband was also used to be in the news business in Hawaii, and so I went to the house, and her husband stood up and basically said, I'm going to paraphrase here, but basically said, "Wow, I wonder how long this guy's going to last here." And um, and it was kind of almost became a roast. Like it was kind of like it wasn't quite like
Was like the
like
Tom Brady roast,
yeah, it
hopefully.
wasn't
I
quite Tom
know.
Brady-ish, but it became sort of a roast, and I was like, what the heck did I just walk into here?
Yeah,
What's
really.
going on? Like,
Hmm.
wow.
Interesting.
So yeah, he after I think after about 5 years, that particular person kind of warmed up to me, and he
Mm.
later said, "Okay, you made it here a
Mhm.
lot longer than I thought you would," which I took as a compliment.
Mhm. Now,
Well,
is your wife from there, or was she like you that she grew up elsewhere and then had moved there?
No, she grew up in Hawaii. She grew up
Hmm.
in Pearl City, which overlooks Pearl Harbor. Um,
Oh.
her mom grew up on Maui. Lisa actually has a lot of family that still lives on Maui, and her brother still lives in Honolulu. One of her brothers does, and so yeah, she was born and raised there, and in fact, still works for a company based in Hawaii. She just does everything
Oh.
remotely, and gets to go back every once in a while and see family and friends, and we've gone back a couple of times, several times since then, since leaving.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Is there any type of, we just recently talked to Patty Lowe, and Patty Lowe has done a lot of work with, the native people here in Wisconsin and the Midwest. And she had a program where, and still does, I think, where she goes and, takes young journalists to learn about those different cultures. Is there anything like that there in Hawaii, or was there that kind of, because I can't imagine going there and trying to cover, if I'm sent to Indiana or Ohio here or Minnesota, it's a pretty homogenous culture. But you go over there and you have indigenous people, and you have, people from Asia. There's just a whole bunch of different people. Is there any kind of training like that?
Not really.
No.
And there probably should be. I mean, and you're spot on. I mean, the native Hawaiian culture, um, uh, his was always very prominent and vocal and really interesting to cover their issues. I found it fascinating, and we did a lot of coverage of Native American issues,
Yeah.
and Native Hawaiian issues.
Yeah.
But the the thing about Hawaii is that are just layer upon layer upon layer of folks who came in, right? Like you just mentioned, like the first people who really came to Hawaii to kind of settle and live there were Portuguese.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of Portuguese people, and then a lot of Chinese people came, and Japanese, and kind of these layers of folks who came to work mainly in like the sugarcane fields or pineapple fields, um, really kind of plantation lifestyle stuff. Lisa's mom grew up that way. She basically grew up on a plantation, um, with a company store, and very tough conditions. So yeah, it's layer upon layer upon layer of culture. Back in the day, you were dealing with like your newsroom was in Honolulu on the island of Oahu, but there's stuff going on Maui, and there's stuff going on the Big Island and stuff. So we had freelancers, right, that would shoot video, and then literally run to the airport, put the tape on the plane to fly back to Honolulu. Someone would have to run out to the airport and pick up the tape to bring it back, or sometimes we'd send a truck to the airport to edit it in the truck and then beam something back. So like if you had a big story breaking there, you were at the mercy of like flying crews from Honolulu, or either relying on your freelancers or flying crews over to the islands. Like there was a big earthquake um, on the Big Island when I was there, and we literally were like ferrying crews back and forth all the time, like back and forth, back and forth. You go there, shoot a story, get back on the plane, fly. It was really hard. Like we were able to. I remember NBC set up shop with kind of a flyaway satellite dish that they could set up, and we begged and borrowed and stole from that, and went live from the Big Island, which was like really unheard of. It just never happened that way.
And then Bob Miller was there renting out time.
Right, exactly. Pritchard, go sell that satellite dish.
So there was no microwave capabilities. You didn't have, I'm surprised there wasn't something like that set up between the islands.
There was a lot of talk about doing that for many years. Like the stations were all, for a while there, we were trying to come up with some sort of cooperative agreement where we could share a microwave.
Yeah.
In Wisconsin back in the day, this is really going in the Wayback Machine, but back in the day, the WKOW and all the other former TAC stations had microwave links because of the lottery, right? So to broadcast the lottery from Milwaukee, there was a fairly elaborate microwave system set up to beam the picture from Milwaukee to all the different TV stations around the state for the drawings. And so all the stations use that to share video, right? We'd have
We
like
called
this
it
really short
WISNet.
little window, like about a 15-minute window to send video to whoever we needed to, or get video. But yeah, there wasn't anything like that on the islands, and it was all, you know. Of course, now again, technology's changed and they can go live from anywhere pretty much. But
Right.
Did you stay in touch with people in the news business in Hawaii? Specifically, I'm thinking of the Maui fires last year. Were you in touch with them about what they were seeing and experiencing?
yeah, I kept in touch with some folks, and Lisa's family who
Oh,
lives on
yeah.
Maui was
Yeah.
very like luckily they were not impacted. They live in kind of upcountry Maui, which is more in the mountain area. Um, but it was, I mean, it was obviously just devastating, and
Hmm.
they were impacted. Again, thankfully no one was hurt or killed, but they lost friends, they lost, you know, special people in their lives, and
Hmm.
they also had to kind of deal with all the, you know, the water supply going down, the, you know, electric, internet. I mean, it was just like it really was um, a tough go for many many months up there.
What got you back here to Wisconsin then, Todd?
That's a great question, Dan. Um, I I kind of had an epiphany. I was sitting in the Kahala Mall, which is this like little indoor mall just outside of Honolulu. And I just was like really like like thinking to myself, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm not really super happy here. I've met this wonderful woman. We've had our son Sean, who is the the greatest blessing of my life. And but struggling in that newsroom, really having a hard time with that newsroom.
Hmm.
And at the very same time, my mom and dad were starting to have some pretty major health issues. And
Hmm.
my dad was beginning to suffer from dementia. My mom was trying to take care of him. And I was like, you know, what am I doing? What am I doing? I just kept asking myself. So God bless Lisa. She was a trooper, and she said, you know, if you need to get back to Wisconsin, let's go back to Wisconsin. So we moved. We just packed our stuff up and headed back. And um, again, I kind of go back to Sandy and her discussion with you guys. You know, she really wanted to. Her mom was such an important, special person in her life, and I think the way she said it was she wanted to really be there for her the end of that journey.
Hmm.
I
Yep.
felt so strongly about that. I really
Hmm.
felt like I really needed to get back to help both of them,
Hmm.
and to make that the end of their journey um uh the best it could be.
You two talk so much yourself. I have to close my
I was
shade.
gonna say I was gonna say fire your lighting director, Dan. The sun is in a new location.
This is my Meet the Beatles right here.
When you got out of news, did you miss it or did you feel like, whew, a little bit of a relief?
Great question, Carrie. I felt relief. I,
Mm,
I felt like I had really done like a lot of what I wanted to accomplish in
mm-hmm,
television news. And uh, it was it was really nice to um, be able to focus on family, and you know, my wife and my son and my parents, and you know, when you're in news, as you guys well know, it's, you know, it's 12, 14 hours a day. It's, you know, it's nonstop. It's, you know,
mm-hmm,
and I really, I have so much admiration for folks who are in the business and are still, you know, doing local news at a high level. It's so challenging. And now there are even more challenges than we ever faced.
Oh yeah.
mm.
We've
Yeah.
talked so much about that, yeah, with all the social media and the immediacy and everything. I mean, we thought we had to get stuff on quick back then. Not even
Oh,
close. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, not even close. I miss covering breaking news because I
Mm.
think that's like one of the great challenges of local news is doing that well. Um, and so I missed that a little bit, but yeah, I was really ready for act two of my
Mhm.
life. And so yeah, I have people ask me that a lot. Like, do you miss
Mhm.
it? And yeah, no. I
But
miss the people.
you use all those skills in these two jobs that you've had since. I've seen clips of you, and I'll actually put one in this. I'll insert it here.
Happy holidays, everyone. I'm Tod Pritchard from Reading, Wisconsin, and we thought we'd give you a top 5 list of holiday gifts to give this season. You know, it's always hard to figure out what you should give to friends and family. How about the gift of safety?
But of you speaking, you were being interviewed about the emergency preparedness and management about one of the programs, and then you use it now in your storytelling. So it seems like you're able to use the best of the skills now.
Absolutely. Um, I think that it has really come full circle for me to use all those skills that I gathered in television news and be able to really use them in ways that I never thought I would. I really never thought. I thought when I was done with television news, I was done with storytelling and I was done
Mm.
with, kind of any kind of connection with television production or helping out with newscasts or anything like that. So yeah, it's great. It really has come full circle.
I know you spent more time behind the camera than on the camera. Were there any bloopers when you were news director that you were like, if you could have turned off that camera, you would have?
And don't include
Um,
anything Carrie and I ever did.
That's right. We are
you guys never had a
excluded.
blooper. I have one when I was a producer at CARE in Minneapolis. Oh God, this is a terrible story, but it's a good blooper. Um, I had gone on vacation for a while, so I was out of the newsroom for a couple of weeks, and I came back and I was producing the 6 o'clock newscast, and this was like in 1991, I think. The Minnesota Twins were in the World Series, right? And they were so um, when I was gone, they had started this segment of the 6 o'clock news where they would go to Las Vegas live and interview a guy at like this sports book place.
Mm.
Okay.
Basically,
So,
what all of sports talk radio is now.
right.
Yes.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So they would check in every day with this guy on, what's the latest odds and what's the Vegas line and blah, blah, blah. Right. Um, so it was a satellite shot. We'd have to get that all set up. So I'm kind of coming into this cold, like it's probably like game 3 and I'm like walking in and I don't really know what's exactly going on. So they go, oh yeah, we got this guy and we set him up and his hit time is at like 6:10 and um so you'll just have the anchors throw to Jimmy the Weasel and Jimmy is going to give you like the line and stuff, right?
Jimmy
Like,
the Weasel.
okay, all right, we're going to
Of
toss it to
course.
Jimmy the Weasel. Okay, all right, got it. So I write the script up and I basically, like, okay, I have it for the anchors and right, okay. So one of the anchors like, we're gonna go right now and we're going to Las Vegas Live and we're gonna talk to Jimmy the Weasel. That
Can't help
was
but laugh.
not his name.
Oh no.
That was the nickname that the people in the newsroom gave him
Oh,
behind the scenes.
oh
Oh.
So so when we
no.
called him Jimmy the Weasel on the air, he first he had a look of shock, then he had a look of anger, and then he shouted, "I am not Jimmy the Weasel. What are you guys doing?"
Oh my
Wow.
The script got
gosh.
approved by the executive producer and the anchor who had been here and reading it, and and everyone's looking at me. I'm like, you guys told me his name's Jimmy the Weasel. Like, that's all I knew. I don't know. I haven't been here for the
Oh
last 2 weeks.
my gosh.
So yeah, we call this guy Jimmy the Weasel on the air.
And was that his last report for
That was
you?
his last report for us.
Well, that's a fair mistake because, there was Jimmy
Yeah.
the Greek doing odds
Right,
on
exactly. I thought Jimmy the
NFL
Greek,
Live.
right?
Yeah.
Very famous CBS sports guy, right? I'm like, okay, Jimmy the Weasel. All right. It sounds like kind of a mob name, but all right, I'll go with it. It's fine, right?
Hysterical.
No,
Oops, big
that
oops.
was
Well, that's a good one. That's a
that was
really
not
good
his
one,
name.
Todd. Well, Todd, we have kept you long enough, and we appreciate your time and all your stories so much. It's been awesome catching up with you.
Oh, it's so great to see you guys, and you are doing an awesome job with this podcast. This is so wonderful to hear all these stories from these great people that you've worked with all through the years. So yeah, thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Great talking with you. And make sure you listen to every one of our podcasts. They're all good. They're all as good as this. And you can subscribe right on your screen there and make sure you come back and listen to more next time. I'm Dan. That's Carrie. Thanks, Todd.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
That's old news for now.
Join us next time.